Welcome to Living Word Ministries with our director and Bible teacher, Debbie Blank. Debbie's passion is for you to understand and apply God's truths to your life. Now let's listen and enjoy teaching from the Word of God with Debbie Blank.
Now you think, boy, that's pretty gross. But what does that tell you is going to happen if all these birds are going to be there eating the blood and the flesh? Raise your hand. Wars are going to be happening, people are going to be dying, and they're going to be coming to eat the flesh and drink the blood. Do you know that during the time of our prophecy number 1, when Israel was an utter wasteland, there were virtually no birds in Israel. Virtually no animals in Israel. Why? Nothing to eat, nowhere to land, nothing, no vegetation. It was an utter wasteland. Today, well, it says right here, 240 million trees have been planted in Israel. That's why Israel has always been a land that has been in wars, because it's a landmass between Asia and Africa. And it's the landmass for the birds. Right now, the birds can land in the trees, 240 million trees. Do you know that today, not today, actually pretty soon, 500 billion birds are going to be flying over Israel in the Great Migration? Twice a year. When we were there this year, we were just like a week off. 500 billion birds flying over that landmass. And they don't just fly over, they stop. And many of them stay there. Every animal is in Israel today that is mentioned in the Bible, except for bears and lions. And that probably they don't want. Every animal, because now it's lush. When we go to the desert areas, it's so much fun to see in En-Gedi these, whatever they're called, I don't remember what they're called, but these animals that climb the rocks and do all these things. The ibex that do all these things on these mountain terrain, in this wasteland, but also in the fertile area. So what we've seen is they're roaming in abundance, just like the Bible said they would. They are today. Here's a picture, just an idea of one little migration of birds. But see all of those? I ran into a lot of pictures that really would have given you a good idea of what happens and how they swarm together as they're making these migrations. But it's not just the migrations, because when I've been to Israel, when we've stopped at some of the kibbutzes and things, you see sparrows and blackhawks and all kinds of birds, every kind of bird you can see. People love to bird watch. As a matter of fact, the week after we were there last time, they were having a bird watching festival because of all the migration that was going to take place. Is this exciting to see how all these things are happening? No, you got to remember, no other generation in the history of mankind has been able to say yes to these prophecies. Now you can pick one or two and say, well, yeah, I saw a lot of birds when I was there 50 years ago. Well, maybe you did, but not like today. And you don't have all the birds with everything else, too. You haven't seen these all together as we're seeing them today. Now, prophecy 13. This is another very fascinating prophecy, because it says the Jews would again be in authority over Jerusalem. Now, in Daniel, that very famous passage, verses 24 to 27, that outline the timing of the tribulation period, in Daniel 9:24, Gabriel says to Daniel, 70 weeks have been appointed for you and your holy city. When he's talking about Daniel, is he talking about Daniel the person? No, he was talking about the Jews, Daniel representing the Jews. So 70 weeks have been decreed for the Jews and for your holy city. And what's the holy city? Jerusalem. When we studied Daniel, we explained that the first 69 weeks have already been fulfilled. They were fulfilled up to the time of Christ. And then we went into this gap period where we are today, which is really the church age, before the 70th week of Daniel comes about. So the 70th week of Daniel is the 7-year tribulation period. Based on that prophecy, God said that all these 70 weeks of years, so 490 years, were decreed for the Jews and the Jewish people. And yet these last 7 years haven't happened. He said the Jews, your people, and the city of Jerusalem. And yet the last 7 years haven't happened yet. So in order for those 7 years to happen, what has to happen to the people in their holy city? Where do the people have to be? In Israel. And specifically, what do they have to control? Their holy city. They have to be there. They have to be in control of their land and specifically their holy city for the tribulation period to happen. That's what Daniel 9:24-27 says. First, I want to read to you Zechariah 8:7-8. Here it says, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, Behold, I'm going to save my people from the land of the east and from the land of the west, and I will bring them back. They will live in the midst of Jerusalem, and they will be my people, and I will be their God in truth and righteousness." Now, specifically there, we're talking about the future. I believe probably the tribulation or the millennial kingdom. But God's saying He's going to bring them back to Jerusalem. They're in Jerusalem today. It's their land. This is a map. I know it's in French, but you get the idea of the map. On the left side, the purple on the left side was the land that was given to Israel by the United Nations in 1947. In other words, the United Nations says, okay, we will divide up this land. Israel, you can have the purple. Palestinians, you can have the green. And on May 15, 1948, you will both become independent nations. Israel said, yes, we'll take it. Palestine said, no, we won't. That's not the first time. That was many times they had already said it by the time they got to this point. Because May 15th was a Saturday, the Jews declared independence on Friday before their Sabbath. That's why May 14th, 1948 is the Day of Independence. The very next day, the 5 nations surrounding Israel that you can see, Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, Lebanon, and then Iraq on the northeast of Syria, came to war against Israel, attacked it. For 15 months, Israel was in a war for their lives. The Arabs planned to destroy all the Israel and exile them out of Israel. The Jews knew if they lost this war, they would forever lose their homeland. They gave up a lot. They didn't have much. We accepted them as a nation, but we didn't support them as a country. We didn't provide their needs that they had, not for a long time. By the end of the war, 15 months later, supernaturally, if you read some of the stories, it's clearly supernatural. Israel had all that's in purple right there. They gained something like 6,000 square miles more than they had been given in the United Nations Declaration. However, it didn't include all of Jerusalem. It only included the west half of Jerusalem. The east half still belonged to Jordan. The backwards B in the middle, the West Bank, which is in yellow, belonged to Jordan, along with East Jerusalem. The Gaza Strip on the left down there belonged to Egypt after the war took place. Now let's move on and look at another map here. Here you have Jerusalem being conquered in the 6-day war. As we'll talk about in a little while, Israel went through a lot of wars after the War of Independence, and one of them was the 6-day war. So on 6/7/67, in the middle of that 6-day war, which happened from June 5th to 10th of 1967, the Israelis captured East Jerusalem. For the first time in 2,500 years, Israel now had control of East Jerusalem. That fulfilled that prophecy, that Jerusalem must be in the hands of the Jews in order not only for the Messiah to come, but for all these other things to happen, including Daniel chapter 9, and the other things that are going to happen in these last days that must happen in and around Jerusalem. That became a possibility. So 1948, Israel becomes a nation. 1967, they gain control of Jerusalem. Huge, huge issue. Now let's go on. Any questions or comments about that last one, besides Rob's? All right, let's go on. Prophecy number 14 is ready to be fulfilled. It hasn't been fulfilled yet, but it could be at any time. And that is that the Jewish temple will be rebuilt on the Temple Mount. And we're not going to read Ezekiel 40 to 48. That's that temple I was talking to you about. Daniel 9:27 says that the Antichrist will make a covenant with the Jews for 7 weeks. And in the middle of the 7 weeks, he's going to put an end to sacrifices and grain offerings. Okay, that says nothing about the temple, does it? Or does it? Well, yeah, if the Antichrist is going to stop the sacrifices and grain offerings, where do they take place? On the Temple Mount. And, well, in the book of Ezra, there's one place where the sacrifices and grain offerings took place without a temple. But generally speaking, you have a temple there for the sacrifices and grain offerings to take place. So that means that there has to be a temple on that Temple Mount. Is there one there right now? No, there is not. And you'll see a picture of it in a minute. Let me also take you to Revelation chapter 11, because we're told in the middle of the tribulation period, John was told in verse 1, there was given to me a measuring rod like a staff. Someone said to me, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. Leave out the outer court, which is outside the temple, and don't measure it, for it's been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city, which is Jerusalem, for 42 months. So that tells us that in the tribulation period, there's going to be a temple. In 1 Thessalonians, we're told also there's going to be a temple because the Antichrist is going to desecrate it. There has to be a temple there, but there isn't one there now. However, some of you in this room have been to the Third Temple Institute. It's a very fascinating organization that is doing everything possible to prepare for the building of the Third Temple. They have built the artifacts, the menorah, the table of showbread, everything that they need for the new temple they have built, they have secured. They have secured the items, the utensils that will be in the temple. They've made the priestly garments. They have everything ready. All they're waiting for is the land to be able to build it on the Temple Mount. That's what they're waiting for. So let's show you right now what the third temple will look like according to Ezekiel 40 to 48. Not a great picture. You really don't get a really good idea. The tall building there will be the Holy of Holies. This will be the outer courts. Not the outer courts that's mentioned in Revelation 11. That'll be outside the walls. But these will be where the priests do their duties and where they have certain rituals that go on besides in the Holy of Holies. That's different than the second temple, which we'll see in a minute. But this is structurally, if you want to know what the temple looks like from Ezekiel 40 to 48, this is an idea of what they say it's going to look like. I'm not an architect. I can't draw it, so I have to rely on other people. Now, where are they going to put it? It has to go on the Temple Mount. Why? Because that's Mount Moriah, where Abraham offered Isaac. It's also the place where what has happened in the past. What's been there in the past? Okay, the first temple and the second temple. The last temple was destroyed when? 70 AD by the Romans. Right now, what's up on the Temple Mount? 2 mosques, actually. So we're going to see those right here. Here is a grafted-in model of what the Temple Mount could look like. This is what the Temple Mount looks like today without the temple. Okay, kind of forget that for a minute. The golden dome is the Dome of the Rock, which is right in the middle of the Temple Mount. Temple Mount is a flat piece of property that's about 33 acres in size. To the left of that, on the far left of your screen, is what's called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's where the Muslims actually worship. The Dome of the Rock is really, actually, it's been sealed for quite some time. My understanding, they've opened it now to some of the Muslims. But it's really more of a shrine than it is a place where people worship. So they worship in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's where they do all their worshiping over there. And they've dug down and built new mosque areas underneath it. So that's where the Muslims worship. Well, let me backtrack. Even though Israel gained control of Jerusalem in 1967, the one piece of ground in all Israel that they allowed the Arabs to continue to control was that piece of ground. Because it's a holy site for the Muslims. Obviously, it's been a holy site for the Jews, but it wasn't at that time because there was no temple on top of it. And the General Moshe Dayan was a secular Jew. The Temple Mount really didn't mean a lot to him. Jews are very respectful of other people's religious buildings, even though other people aren't always respectful of theirs, but they are. And so they left this Temple Mount in control of the Jordanian Waqf. That's what the people are called who run the holy sites in Jerusalem that are Muslim. So this is one piece of ground that the Muslims controlled before the peace agreement started. Now, I say controlled. Israel still owns it, but the Muslims have been given control over it. If there's a problem, Israel can go up there and take care of the problem. But they have given control to the Waqf. The Wailing Wall is the western wall. What you're seeing right here is the eastern wall. And we'll talk in a little while about this eastern gate right there. Notice right now in this picture, notice where the eastern gate is. It's obviously on the east. But you'll see how it is flush with a potential new temple. It's not flush with the Dome of the Rock. It's flush with a potential new temple. That'll mean something in a few minutes. But Bob was mentioning the Wailing Wall. The Wailing Wall is on the opposite side, on the western side. It's a very tall wall that is, gosh, I don't even know, 40 feet high, 50 feet high, would you say? Maybe 40 or 50 feet tall. That's the wall that holds this Temple Mount in place. Over here, you see there's a wall that holds it in place. When you get to the southern part, if we had a picture of that, there's stairs down there. So there was kind of a wall there and then the stairs. The northern part, you don't need a wall because it's flush with the ground. The western side, you needed a wall to hold up this Temple Mount. So when the temple was destroyed, you'll recall that Jesus said, not one stone will be left upon another that will not be destroyed, when he was prophesying the destruction of the temple. That's what happened. What was on the Temple Mount was all destroyed. But the mount itself and the retaining walls were not destroyed. So the western wall on the other side of this is the holiest site of the Jews because it's the only thing left of the original temple, of the second temple period wall. It's the only thing left. Obviously the top is there, but the wall is the only thing that's left. That's why it's their holiest site, the only place where they can worship. Now, Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority president, tried just in the last few weeks to go to the United Nations and say that the Western Wall was part of their Temple Mount, and the Jews shouldn't have access to that. They don't want them to be up here on the Temple Mount either, but they're trying to say that. Fortunately, that didn't fly with the United Nations this time. Who knows if it will next time. It's hard to say. I kind of think maybe it is the same, but the temple that she mentioned that we've been talking about from Ezekiel is the millennial temple. Is it the same as the next temple that's going to be built during the tribulation period? I think at least they're going to start. Whether they actually finish the whole thing or not, I don't know, but I think they're going to try and build it according to the Ezekiel. At least the Third Temple Institute wants to build it according to the Ezekiel plans. So if they do, and if that temple is not destroyed, it will then go into the millennial kingdom. And that's very possible. Otherwise, maybe it'll be like the second temple, which ended up coming into disruin, or it was really, when it was built in 515 BC, by the time Christ came, of course, the whole area was in decay. So Herod built up that land and made it a spectacular temple from the ruins that it was becoming. So it could be something like that too. I'm not sure. I mean, technically the millennial temple could be the fourth temple. We're not sure, but I kind of think so. So let me just give you an example. This is actually the second temple. This is not the picture of the temple I showed you from Ezekiel. This is something that somebody just put this on top of here to give you an idea. There must be a temple in Jerusalem. It must be on the Temple Mount. People are saying that will, of course, we know the Muslims will never allow them to take down their mosques. So the only possibility is to put the temple where it is in this picture. And there are many archaeologists that will tell you that this is not the actual eastern gate that was at the time of Christ. It's about 20 feet down from this. And so they will tell you that this is actually close to the location of the Temple Mount, or of the temple. So will the Muslims allow the Jews to build a temple up there, or will something have to happen to their mosque so that the temple will be the only thing? We don't know. What we do know is the temple could be built up there right now, and it could be built on this site, and the other two mosques could be left there. That could happen. Will it happen? Never, 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 never. Unless God intervenes somehow, because the Muslims won't allow it. Okay, her question is, among other things, why do you think the Jews would sign an agreement with the Antichrist at the beginning of the 7-year tribulation period that we just read about in Daniel 9:27, or we just talked about? Will it be maybe so the Jews can have a temple up here? The agreement that's going to be made is going to be an agreement that the Antichrist forces on Israel. What we're going to see as we move into tonight, if we get there, and I think we will, is that every peace agreement that Israel has, they've been forced into. I'd say forced into. How can I say this? Right now, the world is trying to force Israel into a peace agreement. They've been doing it for several years now. This one, according to the Hebrew language in Daniel 9:27, the Antichrist is going to absolutely require Israel to do it for the Antichrist purposes. Now, if you think about it, every war that Israel has won, they have been ready to destroy the other nations, to go into Cairo, to go into Damascus. The United Nations have stepped in and said, stop, and they forced Israel to make peace. And Israel said, yes, we will, because Israel wants peace. I think what will happen, this is just me, this is not biblical. If it's going to happen soon, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a major war. Either the Psalm 83 war or perhaps the Ezekiel 38 and 39 Gog and Magog war. And Israel's going to be winning. And when they're winning, they're going to be able to take over stuff that the rest of the world doesn't want them to have. So they are going to force Israel to make this peace agreement to stop them. And what they're going to promise them is peace. And maybe they'll promise them the temple to do it too. Maybe. We don't know. But if it's happening anything like that, what we're seeing today, that's what we've been seeing in the last 60 years. All right, this is what we can expect to see. Something like this. We know that a temple will be built on this Temple Mount. The Bible says it will. Everything's ready. All they need is the Temple Mount. That's a pretty big order. Now, when they get the Temple Mount, they can't just start building the temple. They've got to cleanse the Temple Mount. In order to do that, you must have a red heifer. The number 15 near fulfillment is a purebred red heifer must exist. Let's turn to Numbers 19. I'm not going to read you the whole passage, but I'm just going to give you a few snippets of it, and you can read it on your own. Because this is the red heifer passage. It tells us the importance of a red heifer. In verse 1, it says, at the end of the verse, it says, there will be an unblemished red heifer. By the way, is a heifer a female or a male? Female. So an unblemished female red heifer in which there is no defect, and in which a yoke has never been placed. That means this heifer has never done any work, none whatsoever. And if a yoke hasn't been placed on it, usually a yoke is placed about the time they're 2 to 3 years of age. So this could never have had any work at all, ever. Okay, those are the rules. And verse 3, it says, it shall be brought outside the camp and slaughtered in the presence of the priest, Eleazar the priest. Verse 4, Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle some of its blood toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. Then it says, the heifer shall be burned in his sight. Verse 9, a man who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer and deposit them outside the camp in a clean place. And the congregation of the sons of Israel shall keep it as water to remove impurity. It is purification for sin. Verse 10, and the one who gathers the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening, and it shall be a perpetual statute to the sons of Israel. Now go down to verse 17. For the unclean person shall take some of the ashes of the burnt purification from sin and flowing water, and flowing water shall be added to them in a vessel. And a clean person shall take hyssop and dip it in the water and sprinkle it on the tent and on all the furnishings and all the persons who are there. Add on the one who touches the bone, or the one he slays, or the one dying naturally, or the grave. So that's a lot of words. What does it tell you these ashes of the red heifer are going to be used for? Purification. Anyone who's touched anything unclean, these ashes are going to be mixed with water, and it's going to be used for purification. Do you think after 1,400 years of the Temple Mount having 2 Muslim mosques up there that it's going to need purification? Yes, it is. as are the priests who go into the new temple, as are the people who build the temple. They're all going to need to be purified. The only way they can be purified is through the ashes of the red heifer. So there are the requirements. We've read them just now from what it says in the Bible. I added there, never put to work, no leaning, riding, putting cloth on its back. I mean, the Jews are so precise about this that they have people monitoring right now a red heifer 24/7 to make sure that nobody accidentally leans up against it, puts something on it. Anything happens that could be considered work, because then this red heifer would be impure. There have been many red heifers. Specifically in 2000, a red heifer was found, and they thought it was the one. Unfortunately, it sprouted a couple of white hairs. It cannot have any defect, any hair that's any different color than red. So that one that was found in the United States was thrown out, discredited. In 2014, another one was found in the United States, and it was transported to Israel, and I'm going to show you a picture of it in a minute. Now, in 2015, the Third Temple Institute has been working with the breeder in the Negev. I'm not sure, but I think it has to do with the heifer that came over in 2014, and they're working to do some genetic work on this so that they can put frozen embryos into Israeli cattle to develop a purebred heifer. According to my research on this, according to Jewish tradition, there have only been 9 heifers, red heifers, in the history of Israel. Only 9. This is the 10th, and they believe they have it today. This is this is what it looks like. It's the front one here. It was just molted? Anyway, just shed its fur, so it looks kind of scaly here in some different ways. But this is the animal that they think that was born in 2014 that they think is going to be the purebred red heifer. If that's the case, this animal can be used by 2017. If this isn't the one, the technology exists for one to be born. They haven't had this in thousands of years. It's there now, and they have to have it. Because whether or not we follow the traditions of the Bible, the Jews do. They must have ashes to be able to purify the people and the temple. Pretty interesting.
Thank you for joining us today on Living Word Ministries with Debbie Blank. Living Word Ministries is a listener-supported program. To contact Debbie Blank, you may do so at livingwordministry.org. That's www.livingwordministry.org. Please tune in each week at the same time for Living Word Ministries with Debbie Blank.